Chapter 13. It's been a pleasure doing business with you, Bobby. Adam stood up and shook the man's outstretched hand. And you, Adam, I have a good feeling about our new agreement. Your software is exactly what my connections need. The Houston business tycoon stood straight and smoothed his tie. That's just what I like to hear. Let's keep in touch. Adam walked Bobby to the door. As soon as Bobby Michael left, Adam ran a hand through his hair as he paced his office. He should be happier. He should be elated by the fact he'd just signed a multi-million-dollar deal. Yet all he could think about was his wife. He'd hardly slept last night thinking about their conversation. She wanted to remain only friends, but how could he do that when she'd become the most important part of his life? Ever since he married Elle, he'd been in a constant state of emotional turmoil. Yes, she frustrated him, but he couldn't get enough of her. He longed to be near her, to share their days with each other, to wake up with his wife by his side. He really didn't like the emotional upheaval. Normally he was a guy with a cool head and the calmest man around. He was dedicated to his work and did what he could to avoid messy feelings. Since he married Elle, his emotions had gone from exasperation to anger, then to liking his wife far too much. Elle made him a little crazy. Sometimes he just wanted to talk sense into her, and other times he just really wanted to kiss her. Yet his home had never been more alive since Elle became a part of it. So when Elle announced they should go back to being just friends with no messy emotions involved, he knew that's not what he wanted. He was falling for his new wife, only she had the last laugh when she had decided she only wanted to be friends. Walking over to his desk, he pressed the intercom button to Jack's office. "Do you have some time to talk, Jack?" "I'll be right over." Adam went to his compact fridge and pulled out 2 water bottles just as Jack walked through his office door. "Trouble with your work or your love life?" "More like there's trouble with my non-existent love life, Jack." "Uh-oh, let's hear it." Jack caught the water bottle Adam threw his way and opened it, taking a long drink. Adam paced while Jack stretched out in one of the leather couches. "I just don't understand. We were getting closer, and suddenly Elle wants to go back to the non-relationship we started with." "You two had a big argument, Adam?" "Yes, we did. Elle was talking to Bobby at the business dinner, but when I saw them together, I wanted to pound a hole in his face." Adam rubbed the back of his neck. "I normally don't do things like that." Jack shook his head. "No, you don't, not even with Alicia." "And then Elle tells me she wants to go back to what we agreed to, friendship without all the messy emotions." "And you don't want that, Adam?" It was time Adam was honest with himself. "No, I don't." Jack nodded. "Elle sounds like a skittish racehorse that's been abused by her handler one too many times." As usual, Jack had keen insight into the situation. "Take it slow, and be gentle and patient with her. She'll come around." "I hope you're right." Adam nodded. "And when the time is right, Adam, tell her you love her." Adam turned toward Jack in surprise. "I didn't say anything about love." "Don't look so shocked. It's as plain as the nose on your face." Jack finished drinking the rest of his water. "Now, you've just got to tell her." "You make it sound so simple, Jack. It's really tough to lay your heart on the line. There's always that possibility it'll get trampled." Adam collapsed into his office chair in a stupor as he thought about Jack's words. "True, but that's why you need to ask yourself if you can live without her. When you know the answer to that, you can chase after what you really want." "Jack, you might look like a pirate, but you're surprisingly good at understanding people." "What can I say? It's a gift." Jack grinned and stood to his feet. "I'm rooting for you, brother." Adam chuckled as Jack walked out of his office. Now all he needed to do was to take Jack's advice. That was easier said than done when it came to his wife. He'd talk to Elle tonight. Mentally, he rehearsed everything he wanted to say to her. There was so much he longed to tell her. To start with, he wanted to tell Elle that loving her had changed his life. Since he'd met her, he felt more alive than he'd ever been. He loved her. Yet simply telling her that he loved her seemed far too inadequate, especially since there was so much more to how he felt than 3 simple words could express. Somehow he needed to get the words out to let his wife know how much she meant to him, even if she insisted that they weren't to talk about messy emotions. Elle brushed through her hair and put it up in her usual French twist. She wanted to be on time for the late afternoon tea with Adam's mum. She had just got back home from another horse therapy training with the children at her father's ranch. It was really difficult to go there now, as the large for sale sign taunted her, reminding her that she had failed to keep the ranch. She desperately wished there was another way to save her father's ranch, but right now she couldn't see how. Elle changed quickly into a princess tea-length blue summer dress made of light chiffon. She kept her hair down and slipped her feet into matching blue shoes. Today, she really looked forward to getting to know Eliza better. It just felt a little awkward to talk with her husband's mother when she was feeling a little annoyed with Adam. Maybe this would help get her mind off her own problems. Elle wrote a quick note to remind Adam of where she was and drove to the city to meet Eliza. As soon as she stepped into the restaurant, her jaw dropped slightly as she looked up at the glittering chandeliers that hung from the high ceilings. The front desk and door entrance were lined with mahogany wood and heightened her awareness of the elegant high tea restaurant she entered. Soon she was led toward Eliza's table. Elle glanced at many women with their daughters who had dressed up in posh dresses, gloves, and hats for their high tea experience. Eliza was dressed in a tea-length blue dress that complimented her eyes. "Hello, Elle." Eliza stood up from her table and kissed her on the cheek. "Hi, Mum." Today especially it felt strange to call Eliza by that name, because of the awkwardness between her and Adam. A new wariness rose up within her. She longed for the love of a mother, someone just like Eliza. Yet, Elle's marriage to her son was on borrowed time. Any close relationship with Adam's mother was just asking for more pain and heartache. "This is a beautiful restaurant. Thanks for inviting me to tea, Mum." "I'm glad you like it, dear. It's good to be pampered once in a while." Eliza winked at her and sighed. "This is so relaxing." "It is." Elle took a sip of water. The waiter came and took their order. "Now I want to hear all about you." Her mother-in-law sipped her water and peered over at her. "How's it going with your new horse?" "Really good. I was able to run him most days this week, and he made really good time. It won't be long before he's ready to race." Elle grinned as she remembered that great ride. "Good." Eliza spoke softly. "I remember when Adam spoke to me about ideas for your birthday gift. I'm so happy he found something you really love." "Justice is the best gift I've ever had. I'm still surprised by Adam's generous gift." "Adam's gift doesn't surprise me at all. Ever since he was a little boy, Adam always did what he could to make the people he loved happy." Eliza paused for a moment, her gaze focused on Elle. "Whenever I talk to him lately, he speaks highly of you. I can tell you're very special to him." Elle wanted to believe that was true, but she knew better. This was a marriage based on convenience, not love. Adam made that plain from the beginning. Still, she found herself drawn into the cozy picture Eliza painted of a couple who loved each other. Adam's mum smiled and toyed with her napkin. "I had a gut feeling, long before Adam's father, or even his great-grandfather realized it, that Adam would find a way to come back to the ranch and the horses." Daniel was sure Adam would only focus on developing computer software since that was his interest growing up. But I saw how Adam came alive whenever he would visit his great-grandfather's ranch. Adam does love Gran's ranch. He's also the most generous and protective man I've ever known. It was true. Elle had experienced it herself. Adam always was, even from a young age, Eliza explained. He was always taking care of some sort of stray animal whenever he'd go to the ranch. He would help his great-grandfather with the horses, and they would often race together. Adam has always been good with people, often seeing details that others miss. Eliza turned to Elle, her blue eyes glowing with love for her son, as she continued. I remember one summer when Adam was 12, his best friend, a neighbor who lived near his great-grandfather's ranch, got hurt in a horse racing accident. Joe was hightailing it down a dirt road when the horse shied from some sort of noise, and he went flying through the air. His best friend was paralyzed from the waist down from that accident. I'm so sorry to hear that. It was hard on Adam. It was a difficult time in his life. What happened to his friend and the horse? Well, Adam ended up going to Joe's family home to see his friend. When he realized they wanted to get rid of that horse, Adam offered to take the mare to his great-grandfather's ranch. It meant so much to Joe that the horse he loved was taken care of. The horse had cuts all over her body and was skittish too, afraid to let anyone near her. Eliza went on. But Adam kept feeding, brushing, and caring for that mare until she was well again. She smiled and shook her head. You should have seen that horse. That mare was the one horse on his great-grandfather's ranch that tested Adam the most. She wouldn't let anyone near her. Al's smile weakened. A knot formed in her stomach. Not unlike the horse, she was an orphan and needed someone to help her. The puzzle pieces began to come together in her mind of all that Adam had done for her ever since she was a child. He had helped her with her homework from school as a young girl. He had protected her from wild animals like a snake and a bear. And he had protected her from one of the mean farmhands. Later, her father fired that man. Adam was a very protective man. He was a rescuer. He always had been. Perhaps he'd seen it as his duty to marry and rescue her from her stepmother and to save the ranch from foreclosure. Did Adam keep that horse? The knot grew bigger in Elle's stomach, afraid to hear the answer. Eliza nodded. Yes, Adam named that horse Cowgirl. He worked with her, patiently trying to train her and make the horse feel safe. Cowgirl was the same horse Adam rode to race against Elle on Big Red when she was a young girl. Didn't Adam get tired of Cowgirl's surly moods and then lose interest in that horse after a while? As Adam became a teenager, he began to spend more time with his friends. Cowgirl was still at his great-grandfather's ranch. Whenever Adam could get out to the ranch, he'd ride that horse, spending as much time with her as he could. Of course, when Adam worked for your father, he saw that horse most of the time. You must remember that. I do remember. Elle sighed as memories of spending time with Adam in her childhood swept over her. Her mother-in-law continued telling her story. Later on, when Adam started college, Cowgirl died. Adam was real sad about it for the longest time, but he eventually moved on from that loss. But it was real hard on him. A chilling sensation made its way down Elle's arms, settling in her stomach. She struggled to hide her heartache from her mother-in-law. All of Adam's talk about her being the best thing that had happened to him wasn't the truth. It was just Adam's way of making Elle feel better about herself. The truth was, he hadn't accepted her as she was, not really. To him, Elle was a poor orphan girl, the lonely little neighbor girl who was helpless and in need of being rescued. Adam didn't believe that she was the best thing that happened to him, and like his friend's horse, Adam would eventually replace her too. Elle was convinced that his interest in her would wander. She was sure that his feelings for her would wane. Perhaps they already had. A numbness spread to Elle's arms and continued down her legs. She felt dead inside. All her hopes for anything more between her and Adam had now been lost. Somehow she made it through the rest of the tea with Eliza. She answered her questions and spoke in her usual casual way, hoping that her mother-in-law was none the wiser to how she really felt. Meanwhile, for Elle, it felt like the whole world had suddenly crashed down on her. By the time she drove home, the sun had set. It was pouring rain as she arrived back at the ranch. She felt sick to her stomach as she got out of the car. Her heart galloped as she saw Adam's car when she walked up the front steps. What would she say to him? Uncertain, she opened the door to the house. Her husband stood there like he'd been waiting for her. The top 2 buttons of his white shirt were unbuttoned, and it looked like he'd been running his hand through his hair all day. Hey there. Adam's gaze followed her as she hung up her jacket and set her purse down on the counter. Hi, Adam. Do you want something to drink? Elle murmured as she walked to the table and set her things down. Adam followed her, leaning against the doorway. Her hands shook slightly as she grabbed a couple of glasses from the cupboard. She didn't turn around as she spoke. How was your day? Not so great. Adam's quiet tone made Elle turn around. She saw a furrow form on his forehead, his blue eyes solemn and intense. How was yours? Good. She just stood there for a moment, silent. Adam's piercing gaze made her nervous. Elle forced a smile at Adam, feeling unsettled. Did you have a good time with my mother? I hope high tea was the type of pampering you hoped for, cowgirl. Elle recoiled at the nickname. Why do you call me that, Adam? Cowgirl? She gave a sharp nod before adding ice to each glass. I'm not really sure. Adam rubbed a hand along his jaw. I did have a horse with that name once. The one you brought back to your great-grandfather's ranch after your friend's accident? She glanced up at him once before turning her back to him to pour water into each cup. He peered over at her, curiosity etched on his face. Yes, that's the one. How did you know? Your mom said something about it today. Her throat tightened, and she tried swallowing away the bitter taste that had formed in her mouth. She turned around to face him. Your mom told me that horse was a piece of work. Adam chuckled at the memory. It took a little bit of patience, but the mare eventually came around. Sort of like I did. Al's voice wavered, still unable to turn around to face him. You? How do you mean? Adam glanced up, surprised. I thought we were talking about my old horse, Cowgirl. Yes, that is what we're talking about. Al twisted around to look Adam in the eye, steadying herself on the counter behind her. As I think about it, there seems to be similar traits between your old horse and me. I'm much like Cowgirl. Adam looked startled. That's the silliest thing I've ever heard. Maybe, but I really want to ask you why you would marry a girl like me, a woman who was desperate for money to save her dad's ranch. You could have married someone else and not given away that much money. Well, it's like I told you before. All the other women were superficial. You were at least honest and real about what you needed. And you wanted to save me from losing the ranch. Al choked out the words, as now that part wasn't true anymore. Her stepmother's plan to sell the ranch meant she was going to lose the land anyway. Well, I suppose that's true. Adam stuttered a little and spoke quieter, as if trying to calm her down. But I wanted to have you nearby as a neighbor, too, so making sure you had enough money to pay off the mortgage and keep your late father's ranch land seemed like the ideal solution to both our problems. I still think it was a lot of money to give away, especially when there must be many women who would have married you for nothing, Al continued. I didn't care that it was a lot of money. I wanted to do something that would be helpful. This may come as a shock to you, Adam Stevenson, but I do care. Just because I'm poor and not like the upper-class women you're used to dating doesn't mean that I need someone to feel sorry for me. Elle wrapped her arms around herself and glared at her husband. I didn't do it because I felt sorry for you. Elle dropped her hands to her sides and balled them into a fist. What I think is that out of all the women you knew, I needed to be saved the most. You certainly didn't marry me because I was someone that was in your social class like 𝙛𝙩𝙩 Wentworth, and you certainly didn't marry me because I came from the right family. Adam sighed and waited a moment before he spoke again. I think it would be better if we gave each other some space and time to calm down. I don't want time to calm down. She choked out the words in desperation. To her dismay, her voice cracked. Adam stepped forward and reached for her. Listen, cowgirl. Don't call me that. Elle stepped back and away from his reach. Taking a deep breath, she went on. I want to know the truth, Adam. Ever since we began this fake marriage, have I been someone you felt sorry for and felt you needed to save? Well, the truth is, you did need me. Adam's soft words pinged her heart with their truth. You needed the money to save your father's ranch. In some ways, you were like that broken horse I saved years ago. So that's the reason you did it. She breathed out slowly, her legs wobbling a little. She steadied herself by putting a hand against the wall. Yes, but the reason soon changed for me. Adam repeated his words as if trying to make her understand. You were so scared of losing your dad's ranch, and it seemed like there was hardly anyone around to help you. Elle remembered how desperate she had been to do something, anything, to save her late father's ranch. She wanted to get out from under her stepmother's demanding ways and to save his ranch, the land she loved so much. But now it seemed that all her hopes and dreams were lost. You're right, Adam. I needed you to rescue me in the beginning. A steely quality entered Elle's voice, and she stood in front of her husband, her posture rigid and resolute. But I never wanted to be someone that you pitied. Deep lines formed on his forehead, his blue eyes intense, and he shook his head. He opened his mouth to speak, but Elle interrupted before he could begin. I'm going to the barn to see the horses. I need some space to think. Elle grabbed a jacket and slipped on her boots. Turning as she got to the door, she spoke firmly. Don't follow me. Elle, wait. Adam called after her, but she kept running toward the barn. The pouring rain had soaked through her jacket and pants by the time she reached the barn. She hurried to Justice's stall. Hearing his soft whinny, she patted his neck and hugged him. She stood there a moment, her mind flooded with chaos, confusion, and hurt. Suddenly, it wasn't enough to just be close to the horse she loved so much. She needed to feel his power and strength beneath her. Before long, she had his bridle on and slid onto his back. Heavy rain sliced through the air, pelting her like 1,000 little needles as she rode her horse out of the barn. Even the lights that surrounded the outskirts of the racetrack were barely noticeable through the torrent of rain. All Elle could think of as Justice trotted toward the racetrack was that she'd lost everything she ever wanted. Tears fell down her cheeks, mixed unheeded with the downpour. First, she'd lost her parents, who both died, leaving her alone. Then her stepmother decided to sell her dad's ranch, and now she was going to lose the ranch she loved so much. But the last loss was the most devastating. Losing Adam. He might have rescued her with a marriage pact, but she had grown to love him. Now she realized her love had blinded her to the truth. She was someone for Adam to feel sorry for in the same way that broken horse had been all those years ago. Her husband might even believe that he had started to feel something more for her now, but time would prove him wrong. Her stepmother's words went round and round in her head once again. I'm guessing Adam has already figured out what a poor choice he made for a wife and regrets that decision. Adam's mother said he'd lost interest in that broken horse he rescued years ago and shifted his interest to his friends. She was convinced the same thing would happen to her. There was no guarantee that things would be different with her, that within a few short weeks or months, Adam wouldn't regret that he married her. Al urged Justice into a run when they got to the racetrack. He went slower than usual, the heavy mud clinging like paste to his legs. Without warning, her horse spooked and jerked to one side. Shocked at the sudden movement, Al tried desperately to stay on the horse, but felt herself falling through the air. Her last thought was that her father had also died in the rain.